little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. I got a friend in Providence, little Liza Jane. Bluebird sitting on the fence, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. I got a friend in Chicago, little Liza Jane. Walk and feel the cold winds blow, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. I got a friend in Sioux Falls, little Liza Jane. Where sunflowers grow so tall, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. I got a friend in Cape Cod, little Liza Jane. Bullfrog singing in the pond, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. I got a friend in Tokyo, little Liza Jane. Springtime ume blossoms grow, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane. Oh, little Liza Jane.
All right, we are going to begin in 1 minute. All right, good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Committed, Supporting Attendance and Engagement to the Very Last Day of School. As you may know, this is the kickoff webinar for the Attendance Awareness Campaign. Yay! This year's lineup of webinars is truly top-notch, and the tools and resources created by AttendanceWorks will surely support you in your work. Now to get started, my name is Jolene Collins, and I will be your technical assistant this afternoon. This webinar is being recorded, and everyone who registered will receive the recording link, a PDF of the slides, and a copy of the chat box within the next 72 hours. To help minimize noise and distractions, all attendees are muted and unable to share their screen. Also, at the end of today's session, we'll be sharing a survey link. If possible, please complete it. If you have problems opening it directly from the chat box, simply copy and paste it into your browser. As you may know, everything in Zoom is customizable, so you may not see things exactly as I describe. What should be familiar to everyone is the bottom black bar on the screen. It should appear when you move your cursor. I'd like everyone to take a second and identify the Q&A pod and the chat icon. Got it? Great. We'd like to see everyone actively engage, so please put your questions in the Q&A pod and share information that you think will be useful to everyone in the chat box. When writing in the chat box, please be sure to select all panelists and attendees. The chat box and the Q&A pod are the only features we will be monitoring, so please, please, please do not utilize the raise hand feature or send direct messages to the panelists. If you're stuck in full screen mode and you want your chat box and participant box all in one screen, you can either hit the escape button on your keyboard, or at the very top, you should be able to select view options and select exit full screen. Next up is audio. The audio quality of this webinar is based on your individual bandwidth. If you are worried about slow internet connection or poor bandwidth, you can call in by using the dial-in information included in your calendar invite. If for some reason our speaker's bandwidth becomes unstable and things become choppy, please bear with us. We'll hear it too and work as quickly as possible to resolve the issue. So before we get started, I just have a few questions. Where should you put your questions? You can put the answer in the chat box. So where do questions go? In the Q&A. Yes, please put your questions in the Q&A pod. And then also, will you receive the recording link in a PDF of the slides once the webinar is over? Yes, you will. So if you haven't already, please take a moment to fill out the poll and we'll give a breakdown soon on that. So now before I hand things over, I just really want to encourage you all to tweet and share what you're learning by using the hashtag #SchoolEveryDay. Be sure to tag Attendance Works and our fellow presenters. And once again, thank you for joining today's kickoff webinar, Committed, Supporting Attendance and Engagement to the Very Last Day of School. Right now, we have over 1,000 participants joining us, and you guys represent quite a few fields. I'm going to share the poll results now so that you all can see it as well. You should all be able to see, with most people representing the K through 12 education space. That is 47%. We also have some community and agency partners, community school coordinators, early childhood education, family engagement and education, health, mentoring, policy, social work. It's so great to see a great mix of people. We do think this information will be beneficial and helpful for you all. So right now, I'm going to hand things over to Kwesi Rollins.
So good afternoon to all of you. Our participant numbers are still growing, and it is so wonderful to be with you. And thanks for joining us and sharing your time on this wonderful topic, this most important topic. And as a dear friend of mine used to say some time ago, for those of you who I don't know, we don't know each other, but we've been working together for a long time. And it's in that spirit that we really approach this particular webinar. I'm Kwesi Rollins, Vice President for Leadership and Engagement at the Institute for Educational Leadership, which is a national nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. And you know, many of you know us now pretty well. We've been working together on a range of issues. We're the home for the Coalition for Community Schools. We do a great deal of work with community schools places. We also do a great deal of work with districts all over the country around family and community engagement, youth leadership, youth with disabilities, the full gamut. And we deeply believe that leadership exists at all levels, and we work to cultivate, develop, and support the leadership and capacity building at all levels in community. We can go to the next slide. And I should have mentioned, as you saw there earlier, we also are hosting a National Family Engagement Conference in the month of June. So sign up now if you haven't already, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. You know, you see the agenda in front of you. We have a great panel today. You're going to hear some really powerful stories and examples. But you can go to the next slide. And I want to thank our convening partners, obviously Attendance Works, America's Promise, the Healthy Schools Campaign, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading, Mentor, the United Way, Future Ed, and Everyone Graduates. And if we go to the next slide, we also want to thank our corporate sponsor, Everyday Labs, because every student deserves to learn every day. So what a wonderful slogan. This is the first of 4 webinars, and don't go yet. I know I'm ahead, but we're rebounding with attendance. So that's our theme for 2021. You know, we'll talk a lot about all of them. There's a lot of language out there. There's a lot of concern about quote unquote learning loss. There's a lot of planning around accelerating learning. And so we are very purposeful in saying we want to rebound with attendance. None of it works if we don't figure out how to get attendance, how to address chronic absenteeism, how to connect with students. It's the only way for us to get to a point where we can accelerate learning is to rebound with attendance. And so that's why that's our theme for 2021. If you go to the next slide, This is the first of 4 wonderful webinars. Committed. Number 2 is engaged. Number 3 is welcomed. Number 4 is fully present. And so they're all connected and they all kind of build on each other. And these are words that we need to just fully embrace throughout the rest of this period and going forward. We've got to be committed to supporting attendance and participation. We've got to be engaged. We've got to create welcoming environments for students, families, and educators. And we have to remain fully present. And so that's kind of that's the webinar series. And we're really, again, glad that you're here with us. And then next, I get to introduce my longtime partner, Hedy Chang, the Executive Director of Attendance Works. I wear 2 hats in this setting because I'm also the chair of the Attendance Works Advisory Board, which is a great pleasure because this is an important body of work, a critically important topic. And we all have to figure out how to make connections and work really closely on this issue. And then Hedy leads a wonderful team. The Attendance Works team, goes without saying. She'll talk a little bit about them, but a dynamic staff that have just kind of kept things going, kept things alive through the midst of uncertainty, pandemics, and a lot of stuff going on in this country and frankly around the world. So we're just lucky to have a really powerful team under Hedy's leadership. And I'll turn it over to Hedy.
Thank you so much, Kwesi. It is always a pleasure to partner with you and benefit from your wisdom. And just want to say quickly, this does take a team to put on one of these webinars. Jolene's been instrumental, but on our team, we have Sue Fothergill, who's been helping to organize all of this work. We have Kathy Wolfenden and Catherine Cooney, who are also helping to person the chat. Just want to say thank you to all of them who have put in so much effort to make this webinar possible. And for those of you who don't know us, we work at the local, state, and national level as well. And we take a strategy that really involves both catalyzing research, advancing effective communications. This attendance awareness campaign is a key part of that, nurturing proven and promising practices through our website, as well as through webinars like this, and advancing better policy. Next slide. And I want to step back and just make sure we have some common framing for the issue of attendance and chronic absence. And one of the things we've found has been really important to do, particularly during COVID, is keep in mind the different things that we use attendance for. So we often use attendance for allocating funding, but at this point, it is really important to hold schools, districts, harmless from funding cliffs, given that we have seen challenges with attendance and enrollment, and in fact, use that data to invest in re-engagement and recovery. We've typically used attendance to ensure compliance with compulsory ed, but given that we know that trauma and the challenges that students and families have faced can actually make it so difficult for kids to come to school, and the way you bring kids to school is not by saying to a kid, you're wrong and something's bad, but to say, we want to engage with you, we want to support you. And offering support is more important at this moment with all the trauma that has faced our families and communities than ever before. So we have to invest in alternatives to legal action. We believe that right now we need to refrain from high stakes accountability, but we need to publish data. And that's why we are so pleased that right now the Fed are requiring states to publish disaggregated chronic absence data. And what we most importantly need to do is emphasize these 3 functions: using our data for early warning, using our data for continuous improvement, and using our data to advance equity. Next slide. What do we mean by chronic absence? Chronic absence is missing so much school for any reason that a student is academically at risk. It includes excused, unexcused absences, or suspensions. If we believe having access to instruction is important for learning, then not being there for that instruction is a problem. And we've defined it as missing 10% or more of school because we saw that you don't want to wait for a kid to miss, let's say, 18 days. You want to look at 2 days in the first month, 4 days in the second month, 3 days in the third month. And this is data that is different from truancy, which is only unexcused absences, or average daily attendance, which can mask how many kids show up to school. It's data that we have to look at and monitor and manage, even now, whether school's in person or whether it's at distance or whether it's a blend. Next slide. It's a leading indicator and a cause of educational inequity. It's an indication of challenges and barriers that, if left unaddressed, cause kids to miss more school, which then in turn causes them to fall even farther behind. Next slide. We know chronic absence in pre-K and first can cause kids to not be reading on grade level in third. It can then predict lower achievement in middle school and a greater likelihood of dropping out in high school. Attendance matters regardless of the age of a student. Next slide. Now, I also want to acknowledge that COVID-19 has dramatically shifted some of the things we understand about attendance. Before March 2020 last year, attendance was taken almost daily in all states, and we basically knew what it was. It meant, for example, Kwesi came to class, I saw him, and I marked that he was there. It was consistently measured, so it was kind of hard to manipulate. It was already captured by most of our data systems and easily analyzed, and we had lots of data really reinforcing that missing 10% of school was a challenge. And it was part of accountability for the vast majority of states as part of their school accountability, and everyone was starting to include it in their state report cards. This last year has been a bit of a game changer. Right now, attendance is required in 31 states and Washington, D.C., but not necessarily everyone. What attendance means can vary tremendously. And it's actually sometimes challenging because if you're in distance learning or in blended learning, the data that kids that we have, did a kid log in? Did a kid participate in a class? Did a kid submit a assignment, is captured sometimes in the learning management system, but not in your SIS system. So we actually have to reinvent systems of capturing attendance in a way that can be done without much burden on teachers. And we're worried that because some of the data, the measures of saying kids are there, are easier to meet, we might actually be underestimating the level of chronic absence that we're seeing, or missed instructional opportunity. This is why it's even more important for us to take a look at data, because by looking at it publicly, we'll be able to ask questions about how we should be collecting, tracking, and monitoring data, and it will allow all of us to notice where chronic absence is a challenge and where we need to add resources. And even if it is an undercount, at least if, despite the fact that showing up to school may be a little easier in distance learning, we know kids are missing 10% or more. It means we know they need that help. There might be more kids who need our help, but the chronic absence gives us a baseline to move from. Next slide. And we are seeing some initial data, particularly from Connecticut, which is the first state in the country to make statewide data publicly available. And they actually keep updating it. So for those of you who've seen this slide before, this is as of February. We appreciate this data because Connecticut actually is using one of 2 states that actually defined attendance as missing half a day, even in distance as well as in person. So it's a bit more of a robust measure. And what they're seeing is dramatic increases in chronic absence across the state. I will say their data also shows, chronic absence isn't a new issue. It even affected some student populations at a pretty significant degree. And if you look at, for example, the kids who are homeless, even before COVID-19, 40% were missing 10% or more school. But what we have seen from COVID is that it is dramatically increasing the number of kids facing attendance challenges. So you're seeing some populations like kids in poverty or English language learners who are seeing such huge rises in chronic absence. And we're seeing more kids with more sort of having a severe level of chronic of absenteeism. So this means that we as a country may actually see a doubling of the levels of chronic absence nationwide. There are kids who were chronically absent this year that have not been previously chronically absent. And it is an urgent call for action that we use this data to see who's been hard hit by the pandemic and needs our resources and supports to turn this situation around and ensure they have an equal opportunity to learn. Next slide. What we know is that chronic absence is an early warning that positive conditions for learning may be missing. And that's true whether classes are in person, distance, or blended. It could be a sign that kids feel physically and emotionally healthy and safe. As we move back to in-person learning throughout the country and you notice some kids don't show up to school, it could be that they're experiencing a health issue. Or maybe they're not showing up to a virtual situation, which means that they have to have support around emotional safety. It could be a sign there isn't a sense of belonging, connection, support. They're not experiencing academic challenge. Adults or students who surround them aren't supporting these conditions. When we see high levels, it is a call for us to stop, unpack what's going on, talk to kids and families, and figure out how we need to put that in place. Next slide, please. It means we have to also look at different kinds of measures, working contact information, connectivity, make sure we monitor both in-person and distance learning. And that's how we're going to get increased opportunities for learning, and positive relationships are going to be key to all of this. Next slide. We're offering a toolkit that is available now today that talks about 4 steps that you can take. You need to establish your team. You need to identify which populations of students are most challenged. You're going to need to craft your engagement strategies. And then after each kind of phase of work, because we are going to talk about how we do this in the spring, the summer, and the fall, you want to reflect, learn, and improve, because this is about continuous improvement. Next slide. This is about taking a tiered approach to engagement. Next slide. That really makes sure we have these foundational supports in place. Next slide. And this is about thinking about these phases of work. Nurture belonging in school, build bridges to school, create community at school in the fall. Next slide. And today, we're going to really focus on nurturing belonging in school now, because we're still in the spring and we still have a lot of opportunity to connect and engage students, both the kids who are in school now and the prospective school students who we want to be in school in the fall. And this is about sustaining strong and caring relationships, addressing barriers, providing engaging activities that keep kids motivated, conducting enrollment campaigns to get prospective students to enroll. Next slide. And to help us unpack what this looks like, we have an amazing set of panelists. We have Shandria Richmond-Roberts, who will kick us off. She's a principal with Harrison, and we'll talk more about that. We have Robert Kraemer, who's the principal of Warren Street School, and also Chad Swanson, who's a school psychologist. They're with Greater Johnstown. They're at Warren Street School in Greater Johnstown, New York, district in New York. Then we're going to be joined by Marcus Strother, who is the president and CEO of Mentor California, and Daisy Sanchez, who is a 12th grader at Fresno High, an amazing peer mentor. And it's through their stories today that we will have a chance to really unpack what does it mean to nurture belonging at school. So we're going to start off with Shandria, and I'm going to ask us to go to the next slide, please. So Shandria, welcome. I want to say a word about why I am so glad we have Shandria here. So Shandria is a principal who I got to know in the last couple of years. And this year, we have been working with her district to unpack their attendance data. This is Shandria's data from the first 9 months of this school year. And what you can see is that while chronic absence was a challenge in the first month of school, she did an incredible amount of work to bring it down to only 6% at this point in the school year. And if you look at the slide next to it, it shows how a lot of that in the beginning was huge challenges with connectivity. I don't think this is an unusual picture in terms of having those in the early months. What you see from this work is how Shandria, and this is what we get to hear about, put in place strategies and supports to nip this issue at the get-go and then sustain engagement through the rest of the school year. So next slide. I want to start with Shandria telling us a bit about Harrison Elementary School. Tell us about your demographics, and Shandria, we are so pleased to have you here. You're an inspirational leader, and I'm so glad people will have a chance to hear from you in your practice today.
So I am so pleased to be a part of this webinar as well. Again, like Hedy shared, I am the principal, Shandria Richmond-Roberts of Harrison Pre-K 8 in the city of Pomona in California. My demographics are 482 students pre-K to 8th grade. 84% of my students are identified as Hispanic or Latino. 11% of my students are African American, and then the remaining 5% range from Arabic descent or Asian descent or white descent. 94% of my students are on free or reduced lunch. And then as the screen indicates, 35% of my students are homeless, and they do live in a motel that's close to my school site. We currently have 20% of our students who are English learners. And so we pride ourselves on reclassifying our students, but again, the 20% is still larger than what we would like to see at this time. Harrison is also one of 29 elementary schools within my system, and four K-8 schools within our school system. So again, we're the smallest K-8, but we do a lot of work here in order to secure and promote wellness for our students in our school community.
Thank you. And I'm actually going to ask us to stop sharing the deck for a moment. We get to see you, Shandria, and we're going to start with having this to be a bit more of a dialogue. Shandria, tell us about the strategies you've put in place over the past 2 years to support engagement and reduce chronic absence. So, what are the things you've been doing?
So I've had the pleasure of working with Hedy in attendance work since last school year. Because our school was identified as a CSI school, we needed to improve in attendance as well as the ELA genre. However, we've been working with Hedy, and we identified our students that are chronically absent. And what I noticed is a large number of those kids were my homeless students. And so as a staff, we collectively decided to look at who are those students and how can we connect with our school community in order to improve the attendance of all students, but particularly those group of kids. So I do want to share, I've been the principal here for 8 years. And the first year when I was here, I just watched to see exactly what we were doing as a school community. And what I noticed is that some of our families didn't feel connected to our school. And so we really needed to focus on relationships and bringing our community in to where they would feel safe, which in turn would be communicated to their student that they're safe when they enter our school. And so we conducted a survey, and I wanted to see the second year, what is the perspective of the students as it relates to relationships and engagement in the classroom? What does it relate? How does it compare to what our teachers are seeing, as well as our families? What are they communicating as it relates to relationships as well? My staff would have thought they had amazing relationships with the students. The data indicated that they were doing really great on that end. And the academics, they could get better at, but with the relationship piece, they were great. My students and the families, however, had a totally different view on relationships when it came to partnering up with the schools. And so we took a look at the data, and the teachers were very shocked at what the students and or the families were sharing. And so we rolled our sleeves up and we said, now we're committed to the relationship piece of the school, because with strong relationships, we can then build strong academics. And so with that being said, we started incorporating events or trainings that engaged our community with us and allowed them to see us, one, as human, but also as a resource to the community in order to educate the parents as well as the students as it relates to mental health or attendance or just activity. So we always open up the year with an event, a picnic. We all come out as a school community, we invite our families, and we eat, and we just have a good time. We just enjoy each other's company. Again, that relationship is being built because they're now seeing us as human and not just as a teacher or as a principal. We then also started incorporating more parent workshops and trainings. So if we added a new program, we educated our parents around that new program. And then we did walkthrough so that they could see it in action. If we had a resource out there in the community around, again, the homeless piece, resources that are available for clothing or shoes or food. We had someone come in from the community, and we had that workshop around how they get connected to those workshops.
Then how did you talk about how you use data to then inform and deepen your work, particularly attendance data?
So when I look at the attendance data, it was showing us that my family's experience with school wasn't strong because the kids aren't coming and they're feeding off the fact that it's not needed. And so with that being said, with the homeless population being 35%, a lot of my kids, I'm maybe their third or fourth school within the last 2 years. And so they weren't staying long. And so there was really no connection with the importance of attending school on a regular basis. And so I would go to myself and my resource teacher, we would go out to the motel and we would talk to them about making sure that their students are there and the importance of attendance. We would hold SART meetings and we would talk about, okay, what is hindering you? What's the barrier stopping your kid from coming? And let's remove that barrier. So now they're going to be successful with the attendance piece.
And how did you engage all of your teachers in this process too, of monitoring, supporting, and looking at attendance?
So we use the attendance work school plan to monitor that piece. So we would sit down, the teachers during conferences and during back to school night, we would help parents develop a plan. Who can support you to get your student to school or to pick your student up or to help with providing a ride to school or walking with your student? Having that plan and then sharing that plan with us so that, again, we can support that plan when we're having these conversations. So we don't want that to be a barrier. And so we took the opportunity even to shift during digital distance learning to incorporate that piece so that the parents know we're partnering. We're going to partner with you. We're going to develop a plan so that everyone can be successful.
So let's build off that more. So now you're in COVID and you're in distance learning, and you all have been in distance learning almost all year until the last couple of weeks, right?
Correct.
How did you have to shift your strategies to distance learning? How did you have to shift monitoring attendance?
So when you look at the data that you shared previously indicated that our kids were having a very, very difficult time connecting. And so though the district was providing a Chromebook for them, the bandwidth was not as strong. And so the kids were getting dropped, or they weren't allowed to connect at all. And so we visited the motel, I went, and what I noticed is the kids furthest away from the main office had the most difficult time connecting to the Wi-Fi. And so as a district, we were already providing hotspots for our community. And so we just started requesting hotspots for every child within the household, because then this would create the opportunity for them to log on and not have to share the hotspot. And then you'll see in the data that eliminated the connectivity piece. I would visit the motels or visit the homes and make sure that we could log on. I walked the parents through it, walked the student through it, so that everyone could see that it does work, and that as a team, we're going to be able to continue to educate their student, even with them being on distance learning.
So, Shandria, folks have a question about, can you say a little bit more about the plan that you have used with families and what that looks like?
So the school plan is a document that we were able to use from attendance work. The plan discussed, okay, parents, who's responsible for waking your child up? Or how often are you having a difficult time with your student getting up or getting to school? Is there a doctor's appointment? So let's talk about rescheduling those doctor's appointments. In the afternoon, do you have a family member that can support you, or a friend in the community that can support you? What is the homework piece going to look like? Because if families felt as if they couldn't be successful, then they didn't bother to send their students there. Is there a resource barrier? Is it that they're sharing shoes or they're sharing clothes? So is there a resource within the community that can provide shoes and clothing, or fundings for washing their clothing?
And then Shandria, tell me a bit more about, I know that you've told me before about how you monitored kids showing up actually on the camera and the screen. Tell us about how you used that as a gauge of who needed support and then what you did in response.
So our belief as a school site is, in order for you to truly be in attendance, we have to see you on the screen. And so though you may be present and you don't want to show yourself to us as a school community, then you're not present because you're not engaged and we can't see how you're doing. If we found that students were not willing to show their faces or not logging on personally, I would go and do a visit to the home. Me and my resource teacher would go out, we would photobomb, I would sit there, I would partner with the families, and I would help the student log on and motivate them and let them know no tiger is left behind, because that is our mascot. We will do this together. I will help you log in. I will sit here with you in class if that's what it takes in order for you to be successful, because our commitment to you is we will build a strong relationship because you're important, but also we will go through this together with you and you will not be left alone. We found that families really appreciated that. We would make sure that our parents were connected. As soon as a student missed, they get a text sharing, Tiger, you were missed, and what they missed for that day.
And Shandria, there's a question of clarification. Are you saying that students were marked absent if they didn't show up on the screen? Because some districts have that as a policy.
No, they were not marked absent. Our district's policy is, long as they attempted work, or we heard from the family, or they showed up in person, not even showing their screen, they were present. But for us as a school community, if we did not see them, then they were not present, and we needed to connect because we need to make sure they're okay.
And say a bit, how do you manage when families themselves are overwhelmed? What is it that has to happen to engage them and support them? Because you're talking with families who are addressing like multiple challenges.
So if there's a barrier within the family, then it's going to impede the attendance and the learning of the students. And so definitely having a relationship with the community, letting them know that there are resources out there that are available. During my coffee with the principal, any interactions that we have with the community, we are communicating with them that we need to partner and we have resources available for you. So please let us know. Just having that relationship since I've been here year 2 has allowed me to foster an opportunity for us to talk and engage my community so that I know what the needs are.
And one last thing, what's the key to engaging your staff? You don't have you got a large school, what, 400, almost 500 kids. Don't have a ton of other staff. You mostly have teachers who are doing this work with you. What's the key to engaging your teachers in this as partners in this with you?
Definitely having a relationship with your teachers from the beginning. Definitely making sure they're okay and letting them know that whatever you need, I'm here for you just as well as I'm here for the students. My community, my teachers, I should say, are an amazing group of people. They're vested in what we're doing because, again, they know I'm vested in them. anything that they need, anything that they're thinking. We share the leadership. I don't top down manage. We talk about what the data is indicating, and then how do they see us overcoming that barrier as a school community. And then providing that safety piece, always keeping my door open, even during distance learning, reaching out to me via text, via phone call, via email, via Zoom, whatever they need, because again, they're just as important as the students and the families, and we have to stay connected.
Thank you so much, Shandria. Can you also do me a favor and put in the chat, because I know we're running out of time, one other last question I wanted you to talk about, which is talking about how you are making sure that you're getting kindergartners to enroll for next year. So I'm gonna
in the chat.
Yeah, why don't you say one sentence about it, and I'll have you offer a little details in the chat, and then we're going to shift to Warren Street.
So definitely having coffee with the principal and letting them know that we have now opened enrollment, doing phone blasts, continually reminding them that kinder enrollment is now started. My kinder response has been really well. We've already enrolled students. Again, my kinder numbers are holding and have been holding all year, because we want our first experience with them to be a positive one.
Thank you, Shandria. And now it is my pleasure. Thank you again, Shandria, for the amazing work, but I want to shift to the other part of the country. I think we're going north and east by a significant amount, and asking Bob Kraemer and Chad Swanson to join us. Bob is also a principal. Very different set of conditions. So I'm actually going to ask Bob to start us off and tell us a little bit, because we're going to have to ground ourselves in a new reality, about your school and your school district.
Yeah, you got it. Definitely a different situation with us. And first, I'd like to say I had Chad Swanson, our school psychologist, join us today. We've been working together for 3 years now, and we've been implementing a lot of different attendance initiatives, and I didn't feel right to speak about them without him. And we've done these in 2 different schools now. And so it's very important to have him. So thank you, Dr. Swanson, for joining me today. He didn't want to, but I made him.
Teamwork.
Yes. Okay, we could go on to the next slide, please. A little bit about Warren Street and about our school district. First thing, I'm not going to talk too much about the stats here. Some things that you should know about our district. We're a small district. We're about 1,500 students. I think some of the obstacles we're facing right now, you can see that free and reduced lunch is 52%. It's not as much as what our last presenter had, but it's gone up considerably over the years. And I could honestly say that is not an accurate reflection of our community right now. We are going on 3 years straight of a supermajority vote being voted down, which has caused us to lose over 40 teachers and staff, and we were short prior to this. So we've lost 40 teachers and staff, and recently at the end of last year, we in order to save some money, we closed down 2 out of our 5 schools in the district, which, considering we're in the middle of a pandemic, was not great timing, but it was something that we had to do. Some other things that are kind of challenging for us this year besides COVID, New York State and our district, we are requiring us to have a remote only options for our students. And that makes it really tough for us to get our students engaged and active. I know there's been a lot of questions of like what kind of model you're currently running. We've been 2 days a week of in-person instruction throughout the school year. We split our population in half. So we had a purple group and a gold group, and students would come 2 days a week, and we used Wednesday, the middle of the week, as a virtual only for the entire day. Recently as in yesterday, we took half of our school, our 5th and 6th graders, and we moved them to another building in the district in order for us to come back 4 days a week. So we've been under a lot of changes, a lot of shifts, a lot of turmoil as a district and as buildings. Warren Street used to be a 4 through 6, and now it's a 3 through 6. So a lot of changes with us.
Bob, You've told us that over the course of the last year, you've made significant shifts in the way your school actually supports attendance. Can you say a bit about what are these shifts and why did they matter?
Yeah, for sure. Can we go to the next slide, please? So here's a few of them, and I'll kind of go over some of them and some of the things we've done. But to kind of summarize and kind of put it in perspective, we've shifted from I feel like a district that used to be more punitive to more of a restorative approach, I like to call it. Little things that we've done. Examples, we used to send home letters to families that were that had the high attendance level. So if a student was out 15 days, we'd send home, I used to call them that nasty letter. Hey, your student's been out 15 times. If you don't contact the principal within a certain amount of time, he or she has the right to contact CPS. Which if you want to break relationships, send that letter home, because that did us no favors. So that was one of the things we've changed. One of the things we're looking at, or one of the things that we implemented, was actually that letter has changed in the fact that now it's like an electric bill. You know, you get your electric bill and it says, you've used this much energy, but your neighborhood has used this much. So you kind of get an idea of where you stand. Well, we've done that as well. So our 4th grade boy, you know, Jimmy has missed 6 days of school up to this point. And at this point, the average in his 4th grade class, or his 4th grade cohort, is 4. And that messaging is so much more powerful, data-based, a little bit more, you know, restorative than the punitive. Some of the other things that just off the top of my head, just some of the things that we've changed. We had a dean of students and we changed that title to family liaison. Just little subtle things like that. The addition of a social worker was huge, and improving communication. So communication is always the key. At least my wife tells me all the time, and this is something I'm terrible at, is communication with her. So for us, the communication piece was so big for us to look into, see what the flaws were. So in the past, we had a lot of different platforms. We had email and Facebook, and we had the Remind app and websites. We had grade levels doing different things. I think that made it very frustrating for our parents, and it really hurt our communication with our families. So we went to it's Parent Square, which I call Parent Square like Facebook on steroids. You could do everything through it with messaging and emails and videos. And it's just a one-stop shop for us. It's become more streamlined, more efficient. Our parents are more active in communication because now they know where to go and who and how to get a hold of anybody and everyone. So those were some of our main things. And I also have Doc Swanson here because and I know one of the things that we talked about prior was our data and how we use data differently now than what we've done in the past. So Dr. Swanson, if you want to take a quick second and talk about our data.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for inviting us to join the webinar. We're really excited about some of the changes that we have made here at Warren Street. And in one of those, Hedy, earlier in the PowerPoint, you had said that using average daily attendance kind of masks the attendance issues and kind of in masking what the real story is. And so we as a school has shifted from our average daily attendance, which ranged about 90% on average of students attending per day. And so that seems really good. However, this year when we partnered with Attendance Works back in October, we really started shifting our focus to the chronic absentee data. And it's given us and our attendance teams kind of a more nuanced approach at really understanding specific subsets of our student population who are considered at risk for being chronically absent or who are currently already chronically absent. So when we only focused on our average daily attendance, we were just looking at kind of our overall population as a whole versus really dialing into specific students that were missing school. So that's been a big shift through the Attendance Works process of really identifying our chronic absentee data. We were asked to identify a subset of students who were missing a lot of school. And when we looked at our data, we found that our sixth graders in the district had the highest chronic absenteeism rate. So on the previous slide, it indicated that our district rate is 15.9%. But when we looked at our sixth graders, we actually found that they were at 28.4%. So it's quite a difference. So we felt like we needed to focus in at least on our pilot interventions in sixth grade to have the most meaningful impact. And then when we looked at the data even further, we noticed that we found a few factors that were associated with high absences. So for example, girls were more absent than boys in sixth grade. Socioeconomic status, a higher percentage of sixth graders who came from economically disadvantaged families were more chronically absent than children who didn't come from those backgrounds. And circling back to gender, we found that more girls came from economically disadvantaged families in our sixth grade. And the third factor was family makeup. So we found that students who came from family backgrounds of split family households, a single parent home, or a grandparent or another relative serving as the primary guardian, those students were missing school more. So we were looking at all of these specific factors. And so we zeroed in on a subset of girls in sixth grade who came from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as split family houses, to start intervening with that population.
Thank you very much, Doc. So just so we know, that became our first mentor group. And that kind of kicked off one of our initiatives. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so one more thing before, I know we want to talk about the mentoring group too, but one other thing, and we've been talking about COVID and the changes we've made in schools and districts to kind of combat what we're seeing from our homes and our families, is we implemented an SEL program into our classrooms. And what started off as something small with an SEL team has kind of grown throughout this course of year, and we kind of shifted our directions multiple times to impact multiple different people in our community and in our school district. And Doc Swanson was a big part of that. If you want to kind of explain that a little bit more for us, Dr. Swanson.
Yep, so over the summer when we were tasked with designing a reopening plan, we were very intentional about including ways and building ways in for our students to receive social emotional learning in our programming, in our curriculum. And we have a 3-tier PBIS model at school that offers a lot of social emotional supports, which we feel like is critical for students to feel like they're in a positive headspace for attending school and for learning. Teachers actually teach direct SEL lessons in the classroom, and the lesson plans are developed by a committee of teachers and counselors here at school that follow CASEL's 5 core social emotional competencies like social awareness and relationship skills. We also had the goal in mind of ensuring that students felt a connection to their teachers and to their school community, especially this year since students were only able to attend in-person learning twice a week because of our hybrid model due to social distancing constraints. So when we're reviewing SEL as a tier 1 strategy for improving attendance, SEL time facilitated student relationships and connections with their teachers, offered opportunities for teachers to talk to their students about topics like emotions, how to cope with stress, how to have a growth mindset, how to deal with conflicts that come up in friendships. But we also wanted our students to feel connected with their broader community as well. And so back in January and February, we really started doing more community-based projects where students were, for example, writing thank you cards for our healthcare workers, and we sent them to the local hospital. They're currently planting marigold flowers that they're going to be sending to the nursing home, the local nursing homes in June. And we just felt like this connection to school community as well as the community at large could be really helpful for our students, especially with this period of isolation that we've been enduring this past year in the pandemic. So SEL has been a primary focus for a lot of reasons, but it's also helped to foster student engagement and to encourage school attendance.
Bob, before we have a couple minutes left, can you talk more in depth? This has been so helpful, particularly about the mentoring that you were then able to put in place.
Yeah, so the mentoring program we started a little bit late in the year because we started working with Attendance Works a little bit late in the year, but we made a lot of progress, especially recently. So our mentoring program started for us really small, and I know there's probably some really big school districts out there, so this might not work as well with, but we have a small community, and I say small, but we have 120 kids in our 6th grade. But being part of the community and things like that, we know the families, we know the kids, and that's really helped us start this mentor group. So our first thing is we started small. We started with a pilot group. No one really knew we were even doing this, but our attendance team and our data coaches. We've seen what other schools have done. We had another school in our district try to go top down, implement everything at once. This is what you're doing, have it done in 2 weeks. And it just flopped. And we knew, number one, we were not going to do that, and it wasn't going to work. And especially in the beginning, we kind of talked about the challenges we're seeing right now and the things we're going through as a community and a district. So we came up with a creative way of implementing our program. So basically what we did, Doc kind of went over the variables that we were looking at. So out of our 120 students in 6th grade, we narrowed it down to 12 students. And these were our at-risk students, like our female students coming from a single family. We also added like failing a subject in there, just little variables, but they were 12 at-risk students. So their absences were anywhere from 5 to 9. And these were the students we really wanted to impact and get to as soon as possible. So it started with calls from home. So we would call home, have conversations about the attendance with the parents and the students. We discussed things like what the program was, how we envisioned it. We really wanted to get the buy-in from the student and the family first. And that was step one with our conversations, and kind of get that consent, like, yeah, let's go, let's get them on board. The next thing, and probably the most important piece of this, is we asked them, out of everybody in our building, give us an adult that you have the most respect for, that's easy for you to talk to. So who do you want to be your go-to person? And students would come back to us with a name of a faculty member. So what I would do then, or what Doc would do then, is have a conversation with that faculty member. And it was more of an honor. Like, listen, you were chosen out of all of our staff members, out of 65 people we have working in this building. You were chosen out of everyone as the go-to person for this child. And that's an honor. And so it was more of an honor instead of it being just another thing added to our teachers' plates. Because we know, and it looks like there's a lot of teachers out there who, it is a busy, hectic year. And I know our teachers—
Bob, it's so helpful to hear how you communicate. Can you, in 1 or 2 sentences, start to summarize what happened in this? And we're actually going to have to move from you over to the next presenter. So give us a little on what happened with this.
All right, so we've expanded since, but if we start with our 12 students, we ended up having those. It started informally, so our adults would have informal conversations. And as time went on, we did a 6th grade survey. We surveyed the entire school or the entire grade, just kind of things on awareness of their attendance. We wanted to really see where they thought they were. Reasoning, like, why are you absent? Why are you late? What obstacles do you envision? We even threw in questions like, how do you feel the rigor is of the instruction here, just to kind of get a sense of what was going on. And those surveys really brought in more of the conversation piece with our mentors. So our mentors could see what the survey results were. They had conversations with our students, and even beyond them, the follow-up from these surveys was huge. And not only from our mentors, but from our support staffs, like Dr. Swanson and myself and family liaison. We were able to identify, like, for instance, we had a student that didn't feel safe at school. So, we really pushed hard on, figuring out that situation. And we also noticed that routine was an issue, especially with our students with single families. They were up until all hours of the night and couldn't wake up. So we started our mentoring discussions based around getting in a good routine at home, going to bed, getting breakfast, all those little things that we would have never known was an issue beforehand.
So thank you so much. I want to just comment, there are a lot of comments in the chat that are like, share us your surveys, share us how you had your SEL curriculum. I really encourage you to go to the Q&A and and respond to that, and so appreciate all the insights that Bob and Chad that you've been able to share today. We're going to have a chance to talk, hopefully a little Q&A at the end, but I want to move now to Marcus and Daisy, who are also going to continue to talk to us about, so here's information about how you get to Bob, and then let's move to Marcus and Daisy. And Marcus, I am going to have you build off this concept of mentoring. So Marcus, again, is the president and CEO of Mentor California, and he's going to be joined today by Daisy Sanchez Madrigal, who is a high school senior who is a peer mentor. So Marcus, can you start us off by helping us understand what is mentoring and why is it so important for relationship building?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, let me say thank you to Hedy and Attendance Works. It's absolutely amazing to be in this space with you all. And before I move into anything else, I just think I want to take an opportunity to lift up the name of Dante Wright, as we know that our communities are dealing with many other pandemics outside of just this current virus that is here with us. So just wanted to take an opportunity to do that. One of the pieces that I want to express is that mentoring is a basic human right. I'm going to say it again, mentoring is a basic human right. And the importance of mentoring and how we come into the spaces is what really allows us to be able to move forward with relationship building. We often tell teachers, I spent 22 years in public education as a high school teacher, high school principal, youth development director in Sac City. And we often tell folks to build relationships. Well, mentoring can come into a space, one, as an action, but two, as a mindset, right? So how do we think about building with young people? How do we make connections in a way that will allow us to be able to share our stories, be vulnerable in the space, and allow young people to see that we also have life data, right? So when we think about mentoring, we get away from always thinking about the current GPA or what does their discipline look like. And we start to think about the life data. What is preventing them from coming to school? What's happening at home? What's happening in community? How can we support them in a different way? And having mentors, whether it be school teachers or community partners that can come into the space, we can provide different pieces in support from attendance, behavior, course performance, but of course we can provide all types of support when it comes to belonging and connectivity and relationship building, and really allowing young people to know that we see you as a person, as a human, as someone who needs love, as someone who needs to be cared for, and as someone that is important in this work.
Thank you so much, Marcus, for grounding us in this moment and in this opportunity of mentoring. I also know as a high school teacher, you know a lot about high school kids. So talk to us, because we had principals who were working at the bit younger kid level. What does mentoring look like for high school students?
Yeah, that's another great question, because it does look a little bit different. And I think one of the things that is important for me to really stress is that human testimony is assessment, right? And our high school students can tell us what they need. Our young people can tell us, our elementary and middle can as well, but our high school students, excuse me, can really get to helping us understand how we can better support them. So again, human testimony is assessment. How do we use that to be able to move forward? Well, as adults, we step back and we allow youth voice to really guide what we do in our schools. And we don't let that look artificial, right? We don't go into a space saying we're bringing youth voice, but then as adults, we give them all the information that we really want them to say. Like, all right, young people, like, wouldn't you really like to see more basketball, right? Don't lean into them that way. Leave the question and allow young people to tell you what they need. And then we go out and figure out how to provide. But the other big piece, right, as we talk about youth voice, is allowing young people to be peer mentors. You know, that's why Daisy's here today. Love Daisy, love the work that Daisy is doing in Fresno Unified as a peer mentor. Love Darren Person, want to lift up Darren and Fernanda and his entire team in Fresno, doing amazing work around peer mentoring and how we use young people to talk with young people and support young people, because us old folks sometimes just aren't the ones that the young people want to hear from. They want to be able to talk to folks, young people that look like them, that share their community, that understand things in a different way. So how do we bring young people into the space to become better equipped, right? To have the resources, to be able to lean in with our young high school students and give them the support they need as mentors. And that's why Daisy's here today, because she does exactly that. And is absolutely amazing at it. So I know we're going to be leaning into her. So I'm pushing it back to you, Hedy, because I know
all right, I
here.
think Daisy,
Yeah.
This is your cue. Daisy, tell us about your experience with being a peer mentor. What does it look like, and how has it been part of your own experience?
Thank you so much for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Daisy, I'm going to actually ask to Jolene, let's take down, or Pele, let's take down the slides so we can see Daisy.
Okay, so I am a part of 3 different mentoring programs. One where we mainly engage with middle school students, and another where we work with newcomer students, meaning that it's their first time in the country and they're learning English. And finally, the last program is called the Peer Tech program, where throughout the whole pandemic, people have been having, specifically students and teachers, been having problems with their technology, and we help them resolve those issues. And the way that I feel that I engage in everything that has been said today is that through these programs, I become a role model, not only for myself, and so I set standards for myself, but also for these mentees that I have. As a mentor, I want to show them that they can be the student that's there, that's present, that does their work, that's engaged in class. And so by being this role model, not only am I helping myself as a student, but I'm also helping my mentees. And as I said, there's a variety of age group, from middle schoolers to even high school students who are even older than me or younger than me. The age varies, but that dedication and being the role model is still there.
So what helps? So I'm now thinking about other districts who may say, oh, we have high school students. We would like them to become peer mentors. What helps high school students become peer mentors?
Specifically high school students, I feel like there definitely needs to be an initial incentive. For example, all our programs are funded by the district, meaning that I am a paid employee to be a mentor, which is just awesome and great. And although our programs are amazing and help a lot, this is not something that high schoolers really see at first, just because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but having that idea that I was going to get paid really motivated me and my peers to actually go out there, go to the meetings, and learn more about what these programs actually were.
Daisy, I'm going to actually pull out also, you talk about what does it mean for you even as entering the workforce? What does it mean that it was a job?
I'm very grateful that I was offered this opportunity at such a young age, because I know that in college it's going to be very much different, and I won't have the different resources that I have now and the different help. So learning to balance at a young age my social life, my work life, my school life, all of it, it was just, as I said, I'm very grateful to have done it right now, that I have all these different helps. And not only that, not only did I learn how to, be at a job and work with different people, I also learned different skills that I would have learned in any other job. I learned how to make presentations, speak publicly, talk to different people, manage my time better, and just so many different things. For example, I learned how to apply for a work permit, and socially and emotionally, I just grew as a person from all these mentoring opportunities, because it really does change you. The way you look at school, like, you don't just look at it like, oh, you go to go. Now you look at it, oh, I'm going to get better to learn more knowledge so that I can then help my mentees be better students as well.
Thank you, Daisy. You so illustrate the sort of 2-generation approach, I don't know, or what I think about both the impact on the mentor and the impact on the mentee and how invaluable that is. And I'm just going to put a little plug. We have more resources coming out through the American Rescue Act than ever before. We should be providing our high school students with jobs for doing work that they deserve to be paid for and that offers an invaluable service. So with that, I'm actually going to turn back to Marcus for a second and say, Marcus, so how is Mentor working with school districts to build the capacity to create these kinds of mentoring programs and make sure that everyone can actually engage young people like Daisy in this work?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. And want to lift up that, Mentor as a national partnership out of Boston, Massachusetts, we now have 26 affiliates. So I know there's people from all over the country that are here. So look in your state, look in your city, there is Mentor everywhere. So we are here to support. Thinking about school districts and how we lean in, one way is being able to come in and just provide professional development around mentoring mindset, whether that be mentoring boys and girls of color, whether that be mentoring LGBTQ youth, whether that be working on chronic absenteeism and how we can support that work. The other piece that I'll lift up is our relationship-centered schools, which is a new body of work. Many of you may know Dudney from Mentor, who is absolutely amazing in supporting me right now with 3 districts, Fresno Unified being one, here with Sac County, and then also Green Dot Schools down in LA. But we're looking to be able to build that out even more. And how do we come in and do a landscape analysis to be able to see what does your community already have that's ready and they can provide to young people? How do we do a design lab to be able to talk to champions in the community and in the schools to be able to find out how we can better support young people? And then from there, again, Mentor will continue to coach, provide professional development, and even any research or evaluation that we can be able to use or support throughout that work, we can do that as well.
Great. I also want to probe a moment, Marcus, because I want to go back to another aspect of your prior history and background, which
Sure.
is Director of Youth Development in Sac City. And we also have a lot of expanded learning providers in many places in the country. What are your thoughts about how can and should we be leveraging that infrastructure at this moment in time?
Yeah, that's another great question. Love the expanded learning space. And, here in California, we have over 900,000 young people that are a part of our expanded learning programs statewide. And California Department of Ed and Michael Funk, who leads that body of work there, are doing an amazing job really leaning in with our after-school providers who are everyday mentors. I think about when I was here at Sac City working with the school district, our after-school providers were the ones who were able to help us go find those young people who weren't engaged in social distance learning. How do we use those community partners to be able to go out and support families in a way that oftentimes we can't do as school districts because we may not have the relationships we think we have? And Shandria, she spoke to that earlier. We often, as a school district, do believe our relationships are really great and our families are engaged. And then when we probe a little bit deeper, we find out that's really not the case. But our community partners, our after school providers, those everyday mentors who are really lifting up young people and families in a way that many of us can't even imagine, are the ones that we really need to be thinking about. So it's often that we currently hear learning loss. We currently hear we're trying to get young people back to school for academics. And I encourage school districts to start thinking about the whole child. What are they going to need to be able to continue to support them with their mental health, right? Mentoring is a solution strategy for mental health. With Mental Health Awareness Month coming up in May, how do you use community providers to come in and do healing circles? How do we use community providers to come in and be able to give support strategies when they feel like they don't know how to build relationships with teachers that they've only met on a computer? So after school providers, everyday mentors, they're the ones that we could be using to be able to support this work for sure.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm actually thinking, well, I'm going to ask you one question that I heard, and then we're going to open up. And I don't know if you or Daisy know this. One person asked a question about if students are undocumented, can they be paid?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And that is something that we have been looking into to be able to figure out what is the best way for us to be able to support young people that way, whether it be through stipends or gift cards, trying to figure out what that looks like. Daisy, I will lean into you to see if you have an answer for that, because I know in Fresno, that is something that you all have dealt with. And I want to allow your voice to be the one that is the expert in this.
So as of what I know personally at our school, we are required to fill out a work permit, and with that work permit, identification is required to even start the job. But I know that there is some ways around it, like as Marcus had said, different ways of paying them for their hours worked, and just instead of having the traditional like pay card or direct deposit.
Great. I'm actually going to invite other folks to join us. So all of the panelists, if you can show your screen and be able to join us. And Daisy, I'm going to still lean on you for a second, though. What my question, and then I'm going to turn to everyone else, but I'm going to have you start us off is, how do you create relationship when those relationships have been broken in the past? And I ask you as a young person, if you've been a young person or you've seen young people who actually don't trust school, they feel like they've not, their needs haven't been met or they've been responded to. How do you rebuild relationship in that case? And I'd like to start with you offering that thoughts. And then I'm actually going to shift to Shandria and then to Bob and Chad. But just, can you offer some of your thoughts about that?
Yes, of course. I feel like that's the beauty of peer-to-peer mentoring, because I know exactly what these students are going through because I went through that already. And just as you said, sometimes these trust or connections are broken, and they were broken with me. And so I do what I would have wanted someone to tell me or do with me, be there for me constantly, daily, checking in every day, even if that's a good morning, or, make sure you're just doing good, like focus on your mental health, take a self-care day, things like that, because that's what I would have wanted to hear. And so that's what I really focus on my mentees, that they know and that they're aware that there's always going to be at least one person that's going to be there for them, and really focus not only if they're doing well on their schools and their studies, but also mentally, because mental health is a huge priority as well. And I feel like sometimes schools don't really focus on that, but as part of the peer mentoring community, we do. And it's just something so amazing that we're able to do. I'm very grateful for that.
Well, and it occurs to me that even when students may have broken relationships to schools, peers can be in a place of bridging relationship back to school. And that's a really important component. Shandria, what would you add to this?
Definitely having a more personal touch. When you know that the relationships are broken, you reach out personally to talk to parents, not so much a phone call or an email. You invite them into your school community or your office, or right now all we have is Zoom, because people can read your body language and it sends a different message than it would be for an email or a text message. If they can see you and they can see that you genuinely believe in what you're saying and the commitment to them, then the relationship can be easily repaired. But if you're sending phone calls or messages via digital, it's very difficult for them to read that, and they can misinterpret things, which then hinders exactly what you're trying to do, is bridge them back to connecting to the school. So just giving that more personal touch to them and being deliberate in when you're doing that. Like if you know that you have a broken relationship with a family, you're reaching out to them constantly, reminding them that you're there, but telling them how much you believe in what you're doing, you believe in them, you believe in their student, and they can see that, then it helps to start rebuilding what was lost at one point.
All right. So Bob or Chad, you want to add into this?
Yeah, actually, that was absolutely perfect, and a lot of the same ideas that I had. And it's just the empathy piece, sharing with them. It's helpful for me, and I've kind of mentioned this earlier because I live in the community. I know a lot of the community members. I have kids in my school, which helps because I'm dealing with a lot of the same things they are. So relating with with that parent, making sure you're always responding back. Like one of the worst things you could do, number one, is say, all right, I will get back to you with a response and an answer, and you never do. That your relationship's gone. The idea that not only are you are in it together, and this is a problem that you're going to work out together, but also that at the end of the day, we want the same thing. We want what's best for that student. And we might have different views right now of what we think is best, but we need to work together to come up with that solution because our end goal is the same.
And I'm going to actually do a little pivot on the question for Chad, since I think you have a psychology background. There's a question about the role of mentoring, and then I'll actually add Marcus, with using that with kids who maybe have mental health issues and severe mental health issues, and whether that's a decent strategy, how effective is it in that circumstances?
Well, I think anytime you can link up a child with an adult or a peer mentor to develop those relationships, I think that's a really great first start. Now, if that mentor is working with the parent or the teachers and they have really serious concerns about mental health, it's always also a good idea to recommend to that parent to reach out to a counselor or a social worker or a psychologist, just to make sure that that child isn't, displaying any sort of mental health issues that would be overly concerning, and that would be a little bit too much, especially for a peer mentor to feel responsible for dealing with. But I do think peer mentoring is an excellent strategy. There's a lot of evidence around it that it's a great intervention for attendance, as well as developing positive mental health.
And Marcus, I'm going to turn to you for a second. There were some questions in the chat. I'm going to double this up since want to make most use of our time. There's questions about how mentoring programs get paid for. Is it a single, grant that pays for this? Is it multiple? And then could you start with that and then also talk about opportunities you see with the American Rescue Plan?
Yeah, for sure. So it could definitely be a multitude of funding streams, right? It could be one. You think about if you want to know what's important to someone, you look at their budget, right? So are school districts putting this line item in their budget? It's not rocket science, and I mean that in the nicest way, but are you putting this line item into your budget and being able to support this work, and particularly with our young people when it comes to peer mentors? We think about the $4.6 billion here in California that's going to be pushed out. There's opportunity through those grants to be able to build off of that and create a peer mentoring program. I know in Fresno, they have a director of mentoring that runs the entire program for their school district. So that's another opportunity. And then there's, of course, national partnerships that are out there like Mentor, who can help you and support you, or even, possibly jump on a grant as a joint grant and be able to support the work as you move forward. So there's many different ways to be able to figure out how to pay for peer mentors. You can even find some corporations like a Microsoft or an Abbott Technologies or a LinkedIn who is very invested in mentoring, who wants to support and may give you dollars to be able to push forward to pay peers to be in the space of peer mentoring. So there's a multitude of opportunities, but we need to get K-12 districts to understand that mentoring needs to be a natural fabric of their work. So put it in your line item. Put it in your line item.
Thank you. I am curious, are there other ways, and this may be Shandria and then also Bob, that you're seeing possibilities for, there are a whole lot of ways that the COVID relief dollars could be used for investing in data systems, investing in capacity building and professional development. Again, this additional tier 1, tier 2. Are there particular ideas that are starting to be discussed in your communities about how to use COVID relief to really improve attendance? Either one of you can raise your hand if you feel ready. Bob, it looks like you're ready up.
Yeah, actually, we just had a meeting about this morning, so I could speak on it a little bit. And coming from a district that's a little financially, in a hole, this funding couldn't have come at a better time. This funding, if we're using it correctly, is going to be able to allow us to bring back certain things. Like we just, transportation for us is a huge issue. We're in a city with schools, and students walking to our schools is not an option. We're about half and half. We have second graders that need to walk 1.5 miles to school, and there's no chance that it's going to happen. So incorporating shuttle buses, we're looking at additional AIS support to help fill up our gaps that we've seen since the start of COVID. We're talking about an additional of another social worker up at our secondary level, just little things that we can implement to help with not only SEL, but just our academics, and even little things like the shuttle bus would go such a long way in our city for attendance.
Thank you. And actually, Shandria, I'm going to shift the question on you, sorry, because we have like 1 more minute left. If we need to get principal buy-in to support this work, what's your advice? Get 20 seconds. Yeah, your key advice to districts.
You have to be vested in your community. And what I mean by that is you truly have to believe in the services that you're providing and be a part of that work. Yeah, you may delegate the work, but you still need to be part of the work. You need to roll your sleeves up. You need to be very present in the moment when the work is going forth. If you're having someone else lead the work, you're there supporting, you're interjecting when need be, and that the whole community sees that you're part of the team. You're not saying we have a team and you're not part of the team. You're part of the work that's being done. And if you do that, then you're going to get more people to buy in, because you're not asking them to do anything that you're not willing to do. You're not above the work, you're part of the work.
Thank you so much. You all have been an amazing panel. I'm going to ask you to continue to look at the questions as they are in the chat. Answer as many as you can. We'll also be in touch after this webinar. Can we get the slides up? I want to just shift, do a couple resources and shift quickly back to Kwesi. So reminder, we got this Pathways to Engagement Toolkit. You can find it on our website now. Next slide. We also really want you to continue to promote our attendance awareness campaign. We have lots of free materials. Please sign up for updates if you're not already signed up. Next slide. You can also promote us through social media. Next slide. We have these blogs on how do you think about using COVID relief dollars, particularly with our colleagues at Future Ed. Next slide. And then there are more resources for Mentor. You already heard some of them referred to by Marcus. Next slide. And then I also want to make sure that Everyday Labs, which actually is the place that has also created a lot of nudge letters, and people were asking questions about how do you think about those kinds of communications. Everyday Labs has a lot of materials on how do you think about that and do that. It was the research of Todd Rogers that actually led to both better utility bill communication and nudge letters for attendance. It's the same guy. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Kwesi.
Thanks so much, Hedy. And I asked the team to go to slide 34. One more back. Yeah, because, you know, as I thought about all that I heard, and this is one of Marcus's slides, why relationships. And really that's the takeaway from all of this, because all of what we heard is possible because of relationships. So obviously students need champions. Students would benefit from strengthening relationship ties and building webs of support, but so would teachers, so would parents and families, so would principals. We would all benefit from relationships. And so I just thought it was a great slide, because we all need to hold each other up. We all need to be in deeper partnership. We all need to make real what is collaboration. And then in answer to the question, can you use money to pay for people who aren't documented, et cetera, et cetera? We all need a lot of creativity. And so we would never say break the law, right? We don't want to be so creative that we're fully breaking the law or rules and regulations. But other than that, there's no limitations. And Marcus put it well when he said that's what partners are for, that's what corporate sponsors are for. That's what makes it all possible. If we could then go to slide 42. So I want to mention that you'll hear more at the conference. Obviously, we've got 2 more webinars, I think, before this conference, but you'll also get a chance at our national conference, June 1 through 4, to hear from Hedy and the team. I also want to thank my team, Jolene and Pele, and another member of our team who couldn't be here because she had a baby yesterday. So that's Sabrina. So that's the greatest excuse ever to miss a meeting. So we want to thank the team because they really have made all of this possible. And then to go to slide 43. So we encourage you all to sign up. Special thanks again to our philanthropic partners at Annenberg and the Heising Simons Foundation. Next slide. Within 72 hours, give or take, you'll get the link to a recording of this webinar. So it gives you access to all kinds of stuff. And then the last slide, we really do want to hear from you. This was a very large webinar, 1,900 people, lots of information, lots of ideas, not enough time to go deep, but we still want to hear from you. So please cut and paste this link if it's in the chat. If you can't use it live, we want to hear from you. And thanks to all of the presenters. Special thanks to Daisy, our student leader. It's also a reminder that we need to cultivate leadership at every level and take advantage of the brain power and the creativity from wherever we can access it. So thanks to Daisy. Thanks to all of our wonderful speakers. You've been just a powerful example of what's possible. And now it's up to us to really be in relationship and act on all this stuff. So that's why I love that slide 34. Thanks again. Take care and be safe.